Hi, I'm Wendy Carlton, and some of you might know me and others won't at all, but I've come on here to introduce myself and tell you a bit about myself. I've been an artist all my working life. It was my favourite subject, well, the only subject I was good at school, and so I went on to art college. I left school at 16 and I went to a college in Sheffield, Granville College, and my ambition then was just to be a window dresser for John Lewis, Cole Brothers as it was then. And anyway, the art teachers was saying, oh, you ought to set your sights a bit higher and go on to university. So I applied for Nottingham Uni, Trent Polytechnic it was at the time, and I decided to do textile design because I thought being an artist, the only thing I could go into was being a teacher, and that was a bit too scary to stand in front of people. And so I went on to do textile design because I'd always loved painting flowers and nature. So I went to Trent Polytechnic and I got a first class honours in textile design. Then I was chosen for an exhibition in the Haymarket in London. It was the Young Designers of the Year. So I did that literally the summer that I finished uni, and I got a job working in a textile studio in London. It was right at the side of Bond Street Tube Station, so I was really excited to get that job, and I worked there, but the wages were not very good at all, especially for living in London. So they told us we could freelance to make up the wages, but we couldn't do anything to do with textiles. So I freelanced doing greeting cards, and I got an agent for greeting cards, and I ended up making a lot more money doing my greeting cards than I got from the textile studio. So I decided to go freelance, and I left the studio after a year and went freelance with the agent, and I ended up being a greeting card artist for about 16 years, working for all the major card companies, and I stayed in London for about 6 years. But then, being freelance, I decided I could come back home, and I was wanting to buy a house. I couldn't afford one in London, and I was desperate to get a dog. So I came back to Sheffield, bought a house and a dog, and called my dog Daisy, which my daughter now is named after, and carried on doing greeting cards for many years. Then I decided I wanted to stop working really small and wanted to work on a large scale. So I did a few canvases which were mainly for my house at first, and friends saw them, and I had them in a local interior design shop, and then I started doing local exhibitions, and then I got invited to do major exhibitions. So I then travelled all over. My biggest exhibition actually is Sheffield's Art in the Gardens, which I've done for 17 years now because I get a massive space there, and that will be the only exhibition, the physical exhibition I do this year, because that's on in September, and I get the whole central dome of the pavilion, so it's a huge space and I can take all my work, and my husband takes the day off and helps me put all the paintings up. So I've got that. That's to be my only exhibition this year, and I get my inspiration from, well, I've always had a love of colour. Everything has always been colourful in my work. My greeting cards were colourful. I did mainly designs for ladies and children. I did a lot of children's designs, and so it just followed through when I started doing my paintings. They're always floral, landscapes I do now. I am broadening my horizons and going into abstracts, and my process, I've never worked on an easel. I always work flat on the floor. I put plastic all over the floor and put my big canvases down and just work cross-legged on the floor for hours on end, which used to be fine when I was younger, but now if the doorbell goes I can barely stand. I'm crawling on my knees for a while until I get the feeling back in my legs, but I still just always have worked that way. In fact, I used to get told off at university for sitting on the floor painting, and I started making my products about 3 years ago. I started with cushions, and this was because although I sold quite a few paintings, people were saying that they haven't got walls big enough or they couldn't afford, because original artwork is always expensive. So I thought, how can I start making something a bit smaller and cheaper but people can have a bit of my work? So I started with cushions and practiced on several different fabrics and ended up using velvet. That's my favourite, to use the velvet. And then went on to lampshades 2 years ago and found I really liked making them. And when I put in fabric orders all the time, and I use Contrado fabric printers, which are really good quality, but they are a bit expensive, but I do like the quality, so I carry on using them. And then I added placemats and coasters to the range, and now I'm looking for other things. I tried scarves, which they did work well, but they were just really expensive, so unless I can find somewhere a bit cheaper to produce them, I can't do that at the moment. I'm doing several little videos over the weekend for Etsy Made Local next weekend, and this weekend I've got the Curated Makers online one. If you want to ask me any questions, you can over the weekend, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, that's a bit about, oh yeah, and I've always had a massive love of animals, so being freelance I've been able to have, I've got my dogs, I've got 2 dogs, 2 cats. I did have a house rabbit. I've always had house rabbits, but the last one died during lockdown, unfortunately. We've got some expatriate rescue hens at the moment, our 3rd lot of rescue hens. So working from home all my life, apart from the 1 year I had working in a textile studio, although it can sometimes be lonely because you're working on your own, but I've never wanted to go and work in a studio just because I've got my animals around me all the time and I couldn't be taking them to the studio constantly. And so I go on long dog walks every day, and then just paint, and at the moment doing lots of making, because the making side is taking over from my designing and painting, really. That's the downside, but yeah, my painting is my favourite thing. It's what I'm best at, and if it didn't start with the paintings then there would be no designs, because they're all direct copies of my paintings. I have high resolution photographs taken, and then get it sent off to the printers, and then I make all the cushions and lampshades myself. So hopefully you'll like something you see, and yes, any questions if you want to get in touch with me. Okay, thanks, bye.